It's about making sure we're not creating new work just to do it, but we're actually being thoughtful in like what outcomes we're going to drive. I kind of like this idea, if we're going to add a new step, let's take some other step away so that we're not creating more work for people all the time. I've been through a lot of different things in my past, and I think my philosophy has always been that being more well-rounded helps, more generalist, right? Helps you as you try to lead more within the business. And so, it was kind of shared with me when I in my first job, that was like, it's really hard to run an engineering business if you don't understand how engineering works, right? And so you want to get into SaaS, you want to get into tech, all these things, and you don't know, you really don't have any sense of scale in terms of, hey, is it going to take us a year to build this or a month or a week, right? Like, are they telling me the truth, or any of that stuff, right? And so just trying to have that background as you move into the next piece of things, like, I think is always super valuable. So I can kind of, in the ops world, right? Like, if we're going to do an implementation, like, someone might tell me, oh, it's only minutes. It takes minutes to turn that on. And when the reality is that, yeah, the button only takes me a minute to click, but the business planning of it, the rollout, the impact to the team, like all those things, that's going to take us like weeks and months. And so, do we really want to? We have to take that into consideration when we make a plan, and when we go procure a new tool or do a new thing. So I think it's kind of, I always push back to people when they tell me how quick and easy it is. Oh, it's just done. You're ready to go, because it never ends, right? But I think in terms of some of the things that you have here, right? The forecasting stuff. I mean, we go around, it's on forecasting all the time, and it's kind of become one of these things where I do my own little view of it, and I kind of run through some things and try to do some modeling. And then you get into the tactical side of it, and the tactical side of it, everybody wants the answer to be correct. It's like, it's kind of people thinking about it in a way that it becomes another step, like another effort to do it. And I kind of view it as the model helps us like gut check really quickly and kind of see if we're on the right track or not. And then, management kind of gets you into that tactical look at it, rather than, me trying to be tactical and go through every deal and tell everybody what to do and fix. That gets really exhausting, right? So trying to make sure that we have those models, and we keep making those models better, of course, but don't let the model become the work, right? And keep trying to be 100% correct all the time. It's just exhausting. And then I've also found that, we've got the assessment of the rep, and sometimes you get this like, well, if it's in this phase or if it's in this stage, and then we assume this level of confidence and all that stuff. I think we've pushed reps to actually like check the box that they're committing to it. Like literally, like, are you committing to this deal? Check the box. And if you didn't check the box, we're going to have to figure out what your commits look like. But and if you did, and something happens on that, we got to look at that, right? Like, what made you think that was going to happen and it didn't, or it moved? And just make sure that we're really reinforcing some of that with the reps. And then at the same time, the sales leadership is got their own level of confidence that they apply to it. And so they're very public about what color, the status is of this deal, right? And so, why is there a deal that they're putting in red that you're putting in commit? Like what's the mismatch? And so for us, that kind of gives the softer side of these things, so that we can start looking at this a little better, rather than just saying, everything's in the right stage, we're all good, right? And just taking that automatic approach. So I think this, rambling on about it a little bit here, but when I see that the reps give us what they think is going to happen, and then you compare that to what the leadership is saying, that's where we start to find the things that we need to really pay attention to. And so it kind of brings them to the process as well. And and kind of gives us everything that we need. And it's kind of, it's our view is rudimentary. I think a lot of people assume that the tools can just, it's automatic and you're in here and, there's a standard way to forecast. Why don't we do it that way? And I think we've been able to keep people a bit more honest by by taking this approach. So.
Okay, interesting. So ops looks for the discrepancies in the organization.
Absolutely.
And that's what it goes to work on.
Yeah, I mean, there's, we don't have a tremendous number currently of deals by volume necessarily. We do have a lot that, each rep kind of manages individually. So it gets to be very difficult to go through a full pipeline review with someone. So they might have 65 or 70 deals in their pipeline, but some of them aren't for, 6, 8, 12 months down the road. And so you can't go through all of those and get to the meat there. So the only way we can do that is to start looking at some of these anomalies or things like that, like, try to create more visibility on those deals that are out there in the future and or in the short term, and try to get those ones sped up, right? Like, or paid attention to. So that's kind of where we are. I mean, CEO here kind of gave me that guidance very early on in the taking over the RevOps, that he needed me to feel empowered to just really call it out, right? Hey, this thing's not in the right place, put it in the right place, right? So I, even today, right, I'll call out a rep directly in Slack and say like, hey, your notes don't line up with where this is at, and it just moved out of the quarter. So move it back, right? Like, put it back in a previous stage or whatever it is. And people are generally, they understand that I'm not just trying to like nitpick, right? We're trying to be more predictive in the business.
I want to go back to something you said earlier, actually, because it's a really great point, right? It's about the other functions or other folks in the business, wherever, perceiving ops and people in ops in their time and what it takes to do your role. Famously, it can be difficult to have visibility of the ops team and to understand the full implications of requests. And I'm really interested to hear from you about how we communicate with other teams. We push back sometimes, we set up expectations, exactly what you just said there, being empowered to call something out. What's your experience and thoughts on that one, Justin?
For me, when I first took over the RevOps function, I split out and was the reported directly to the CEO. So there right away gave me some more, autonomy a little bit, right? Like, I wasn't falling in under marketing or falling in under the CRO, where that was the perception that we're just serving that one function. And so I think that was a big help. But being able to say, like, we're kind of like a product company. I know a lot of people maybe have said that before about RevOps, but a product company can't build everything, and a product company can't make everybody happy in the timing that we have to work on things. So new priorities will come, new dynamics will occur in the marketplace, right? Like, things will change over time, and we've got to always be prioritizing the most important, most effective thing. And the customer ultimately here is the business. And, some of these things, not everybody's going to want to do, right? Like, not everybody wants to have a call recorder when they do a Zoom call, right? But that's what the business might need. So we've got to figure that out and make that happen. Or we may, build an integration that might help us support our customers. Well, that might be actually a really high priority. So some of these other things that we're working on, we gotta push out. Or finance, we've been working a lot with finance the last year or so, and making a lot of improvements in workflows and in accountability and things like that. And a lot of that goes unnoticed a little bit, just because you only see like the final, result, like this dashboard is really nice looking. Well, that took us like 12 months to work with them on all of the things that are needed to get to where we are today. So to me, it's about making sure we're not creating new work just to do it, but we're actually being thoughtful in like what outcomes we're going to drive. I kind of like this idea. It doesn't always happen, but if we're going to add a new step, let's take some other step away, so that we're not creating more work for people all the time, right? Like, that's kind of a goal for us in our team.
And the work needs to have actions coming from it. Otherwise, why do it almost?
Yeah. I mean, we've got a lot of things that we may have thought were a good idea that we implemented very quickly in the past. Like, going through a period of time where maybe you're losing more customers and renewals than you would have thought. So we create all this workflow around understanding better why that's happening and all these reports and all these things. Next thing you know, a month later, it's not a problem anymore. Do we need to keep doing that for the next 3 years? No, because it just becomes an extra burden for everybody that, we end up retiring that function and, all that stuff, right? Like if it's stopped serving its purpose, it's not just something that we historically have to do forever. And so that's kind of another piece of this.
Yeah, for sure. It's a great piece though, because when we think of high growth tech, gosh, there's so much you could build and that you'd want to build, right? And stuff does become really redundant really quickly. Do you have any like basic tenets, principles you live by when you think about future proofing and how things are going to scale?
Well, I always push my team when we're we'll get all kinds of asks like just create this field or just do this or just do that. And the question's always in my mind, what's that going to look like in 6 months or a year? Is it even important? You know, just think about like who's going to maintain it? What's it going to look like, right? Like it takes us a second to make a field, but what does that cost us in time and effort and like potentially gaps where people started to do something and then they stopped and one team's relying on it and the other team doesn't care anymore, right? So we try to take a pause, right, and think about that and try to figure out if there's a better way to answer the original question, right? Like depending on what that is. I always want the team to think that way, and I also always want the team to think, what would this be like if I had to do the job, right? Like, so I'm building a process, I'm building steps for somebody. Is it going to be just something that's really annoying, or is it actually like what little things can we automate more fully and make it more future proof and all that kind of stuff? Or again, like you said, for scaling, like we want to create some screen flow workflow for somebody who doesn't have a lot of tech skill but can do some of the things repetitively and more basic. How do we make sure that it'll support multiple variations of this when we start signing on new vendors, right? And just not just build it so that it works for the one problem today, but like maybe for two or three next down the road.
Mm-mm. Yeah, it's good because earlier we spoke about other departments understanding what's going on in ops, and now we're speaking about ops understanding those folks as well.
Absolutely.
Um, and it does just show behind the data, behind the processes, ops is a really human sport. Um, so communication is essential, right? And communication have changed a lot recently. We spoke about being in lockdown earlier. What's a great cadence for driving communication between teams and understanding between teams? What's
Oh my
your trick?
we have I was talking to somebody else about this today. I probably have 100 meetings on my calendar a week. It's crazy. Maybe that's an exaggeration. Maybe it's only 85. But it's a lot. And we've tried doing things like 15-minute stand-ups every day. And we have the hourly, weekly meeting, and we have some of these other things that are going on. And it gets to be pretty exhausting. I've found Slack makes it so that people can just chat all the time with lots of different things and they're happening, and that can be exhausting too. So what we try to do is we try to block off time on our calendar, like recurring throughout the week. Like for me, Wednesdays for about 4 hours is a block, and I just repeated it forever. So people will schedule meetings, but it's to try to discourage them from scheduling meetings. And I think we can, in 2 hours, if we block off 2 hours to work on something collaboratively, we can get a lot more done than we can the entire week, trying to find time to do it, right? And so it's just trying to make sure people are carving out that time to be more thoughtful and to build these things, and then making sure people are kind of available, right? Like on Slack, if I've got something that's not quite right or needs to be adjusted or fixed, we've got channels that we can drop these things in and other people can pick it up. We have a help channel in Slack for anything RevOps, and if there's a new post in there and I'm not currently like deep in something, I'll look at it, and it doesn't bother me to like fix a lead conversion or something like that. Like I'll just jump in and do it, right? Because that might save my team from getting pulled off of something that they're working on, right? So I think that kind of attitude and that kind of collaboration has been really helpful for us to keep moving and staying on our high priorities.
Yeah, great. Okay. So one thing I caught on your profile, which is interesting for me, it's aligning folks around vision, this idea of vision, this idea of direction, this idea of collaborating on where we're going. what part does ops have to play in that? Or another way of thinking about this, what do we lose if ops isn't involved in that conversation?
Well,
Sometimes it's not.
I think, our ops team is kind of at this inflection point where we're working with engineering to make the product better, right? And part of that is tying in data coming off of our product back to, leadership and to customer success teams and things like that, so they can see which features are being used and which, we're selling this product. Is it actually rolling out properly, and are people really getting the value out of it that we would expect, so that we can keep pushing this out to our customers, or onboarding users and making sure they're taking what would be like 35 steps, I think in some cases, down to 2 or 3. That saves real time and money for the teams. It improves the customer experience. It improves everything, right? So trying to make sure that we can build some of that workflow with our engineering team. It's getting to that point, right? Like we're not writing all the code, but we've got a lot of tools that we can help augment with what they're trying to do. So whether it be implementing service cloud stuff through APIs and things like that, right? We can help make a better experience for the customer and not have to like home build everything as an engineering company.
Great. That's really great.
So
I have a question here for you, Justin. If you're in a room full of RevOps heroes, the best ever, what would you ask them?
Yeah, to me, that's an interesting question. I think, I've met a few of those folks that you see on LinkedIn at different conferences and things like that. It's kind of a growing capability for RevOps. I mean, I think we weren't even really thinking about where that would be for us until about 2019. Was it 2019? Maybe it was 2019 when we went to like the RAMP conference that Insight Squared was hosting, that they kind of brand themselves as this revenue operations platform and all that. So it kind of like really, really inspired us to think that way. I think for me, it's how quickly, or, I don't know, like for me, I find myself like consistently staying in one place, right? Like I've been with Flashpoint for 4 years. We've grown, we've continued to build and do this. And my question for folks is that sort of the experience that they have today, that they're, in an organization, they've seen this success and they're carrying it through? Or is it that they're more likely to move on to another opportunity and help them, kind of move from A to B? I kind of look at trying to go from A to Z where I am, right? And just very curious to hear what like that experience is like for people, and where they've seen success, and like being able to stamp that out, A to G, right? Like we're doing a lot of these things and it's really fun and it's a great ride. And so that, that's kind of where they enjoy. Just a curious thing there.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Does that question?
Yeah,
does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, it's like what do you like? Do you like that early stage of building something? Are you someone who perhaps likes to consolidate things, or you're yourself, it's start to finish, idea to implementation? It's a really good point, actually. So that's great. I did want to ask you about your length of tenure, because it's not super typical that I see people with 4+ years. Thinking about where you started, where you are now, if someone was to go on the same journey, tell them about the journey they're going to see and the things they should expect to be coming if they did something similar to what you did.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. Maybe I'm not fully understanding what you're asking. If you're asking about me and like where I see myself heading, I think if I were to go on to the next thing, it's either to stay where I am and continue growing the company, larger and larger revenue targets, bigger and bigger teams, newer and better ways of supporting that, or it's go into an earlier stage company, as like a COO type role where, you're helping that business overall, in bigger ways, and foundationally using some of this ops stuff as part of building and growing that team. I'm not sure if you're asking that in terms of like encouraging people, but I would encourage people to kind of like one of my team members, I've encouraged him. He's been like on the fence about an MBA and understanding the business impact of things better. And now he's in classes for that. And it's like, make that time for yourself, because if you haven't been in multiple startups over your career, you haven't seen those successes and failures firsthand, maybe that educational background is going to be a big boost for you. Because if you don't understand the business reasons behind the asks, you're just building things, right? Like, when people ask me for new price books or new, models that we want to do, and if I can probe them as to what we're trying to actually do in that environment, in that situation, we can help steer that actually maybe towards a better business decision, right? Instead of just being a operational setup and go. And I think that's kind of that's the value that RevOps leader, should bring to the team, which is kind of that gut check around, what actually makes sense for us long term, right? Not just for this one deal or this one situation.